One thing I've noticed in many of the topics I addressed after understanding the theory, that most of the problems, big problems that are open not because they are difficult to solve, but because the problems are in the question. And the free will is one of those things. Now, one of the people that made this problem even worse is one of the persons that people that actually believes that they solved the question, and that is Sam Harris. Even though he's not actually offering a lot of new stuff in terms of theory, but he's very popular and he's a great communicator and he's great at speaking and it's delighted to listen to, but he also made a mess of this whole entire topic. Okay, so what does Sam Harris say? So Sam Harris says that for free will to exist, you need to have the ability to have made a different decision that you made, and that the conscious self should be responsible for most of the decisions you make. And then he says that can't be right. You can show empirical evidence that, let's say, even 10 seconds before you make a decision, there are brain activations that cohere with your eventual decision. There have been experiments that show that. Therefore, your decision comes after the decision has already been decided by the body. And then if you understand that we live in a deterministic, or at least in principle deterministic universe, where you can retrace each brain activation to a prior event, you can therefore reach the conclusion that all the decisions you ever made were decided from the beginning of the universe. And then you can say, okay, no, there are also randomness, but even randomness comes and affects you from without reason. It's not like your decision. It's randomness, and randomness comes from the physical. And then he says, okay, so I don't control where my thoughts come from. So why should I be responsible for them? Like, the body controls it, and that has been decided from the beginning of the universe. If it's randomness, then it comes from the physical world, and I have no say in this. So why should I be responsible for this? Now, what the problem here is that he's doing all this just to prove the ethical position, which is that you shouldn't be responsible for your wills, shouldn't be, and therefore you should address like transgressions by their impact on everyone else, and you should like treat criminals the way you would just to prevent harm, not because they are responsible for it or that because they are evil. But while doing that, he completely messes the whole topic of free will. Now, why do I say that? Well, the thing here, Sam Harris is assuming physicalism, not materialism, physicalism. He assumes that objective processes determine everything in reality. Processes that you don't need to be for them to happen. So he says objective things determine everything, and therefore subjective processes can't, in such a reality, they can't determine everything. It can determine anything. He's just making a tautology when he's saying that free will doesn't exist. He doesn't exist under physicalism by definition. He's dragging us into physicalism also by talking about past, different decisions that we could have made in the past, as if the past exists. Past exists in physicalism because when the experience doesn't matter, when the consciousness is the last thing that happens in the universe, then you can always go back to a prior time, because that's the universe. The universe is not in a specific moment. But if you assume that that's not true, then he drags you into physicalism, which then makes it unnecessary to even to argue that there is no free will. And then he's talking about the prior events, prior empirical evidence of the activation before the decision. That doesn't prove that the activation actually caused the decision. It just shows that there's correlation with the decision, and that the correlation can sometimes be different. Of course, most of the times it won't, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to always not be correlated. Uh, I mean, say you're in on a road and you see like a mile ahead there's going to be a turn to the left, and you have time to prepare. So that's like be like the 10 seconds delay of like getting the brain activation patterns. It's saying, okay, go left, go left, go left. And you most of the time you're gonna go left because you don't want to die, but if and go off the road and perhaps kill yourself. But you can always do that. You can always go right. and And also, that's assuming that the brain activation is actually telling you anything about the past. It ignores retrocausation. Retrocausation is something that has been shown in experiments that, say, in the double slit experiment, if you do the measurement at a delay, like you make after the experiment has concluded, it is as if you made the measurement while the experiment happened. It's basically changing what the past is the evidence to reflect what was the decision after the fact. So if it can do that with the double slit experiment, it should be able to do that also with the brain. So it doesn't actually prove even the evidence you have doesn't prove it. Doesn't prove that the causation. And it's not even necessary. You don't really need to first, you don't need to talk about the self at all. Like the self includes memories, includes who you are, and that stuff changes when you're in dreams. There is no connection between the self and the decision necessary. Like the will. The will is an experiential movement. All it needs is experience, not memories, not self, not identity. For free will can exist even if there is no identity and there is no self. There's still free will. There's still the sensation of feeling what you want and doing it. And it is also not necessary for that will to be actualized. The will can be to do something that that won't happen. Like if I want to raise 500 pounds weight in a gym, I can't do that. I can want to. It doesn't. The fact that I want to doesn't make it necessary for it to happen. And yes, I still flex my muscles and try. But what if the thing that is blocking me is inside my brain, some kind of confusion, or maybe I'm under some kind of hallucination and I don't control my body as I think I do. So. And the same could be said about the brain. What if I don't control the brain the way I would, but still have the will? You're not, and that will can be still free. Like, so I'm saying that the freedom of the will isn't the freedom to make a decision that would change reality. It's not the same thing. These are two different things, and Sam Harris wants them to be the same, but they're not the same. And then he said, like, I'm not responsible for the decisions I make. He assumes something like this. If I was to be responsible, it is because I can make sense of all the decisions I make, because I can track them and for them to make sense, I need to be able to track them to some kind of objective reason in reality. He basically assumes that for them to make sense, they have to be determined by physical processes. But if the will is truly free, it has to be free of that. So it has to not be reflecting physical processes, and therefore it will not make sense. And what he says, randomness doesn't disqualify. Well, randomness qualifies, but it doesn't mean that every random process is free will. If the will is free, it will be free from the laws of nature. That's in the definition of free will. And he didn't prove that doesn't happen. He didn't even address it. All he cares about is the ethical implications. But in the way, he confused everyone about what free will is.